Now for a conversation over what to expect next in Afghanistan, former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and Afghan combat veteran, Congressman from Florida, Mike Waltz. Congressman, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is a terrible day for our country as a veteran, and today America is less safe than it was yesterday.
Talk to us about the images you're seeing. You're someone who served in Afghanistan. Yeah. We're seeing these terrible images coming from Kabul. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, the American flag is down. The Afghan flag, our allies, is down. And soon we are going to see the Taliban flag flying alongside that of al-Qaeda, just as we head into the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So I am, like so many others, going back and forth between rage and grief, Gold Star families, 9/11 victims, veterans that have sacrificed so much. And I was just on a call this morning with Secretary Blinken, Austin, and General Milley, and to hear General Austin, Secretary Austin, blaming the Afghans, pointing the finger at the Afghans for this disaster is painful. Let me tell you, having been out on the ground, when those Afghan commanders have been sent the message by President Biden that America is abandoning you, and they're giving the choice by the Taliban, beheading or go home to your families, because eventually we're going to win. That's an understandable choice that many of them are making. And to hear Blinken blaming the Trump administration for a previous deal when they've had no problem tearing up the Iran deal, changing the deal on Israel, Keystone Pipeline, Nord Stream 2, the feckless excuses that are going around rather than owning this disaster and then talking to the Congress about what we're going to do to repair it is just disgusting and disheartening.
Did they have any easy answers about what can be done to perhaps stop the bloodshed, stop the slaughter of our Afghan allies?
No, there seems to be a collective shoulder shrug. So I just don't know if President Biden is heartless or clueless. But, everyone I know that served out there has Afghan women, journalists, civil society leaders, female politicians. We could go down the list that stood with us, that stood with democracy, that stood for freedom, that stood against extremism, begging us for help and asking us, how can we abandon them this way? Look, at the end of the day, for the American people, we're about to see the reemergence of Al-Qaeda 3.0, but it's going to be far worse because now they have access to tons of weaponry, artillery, ammunition, armor, and others that we've essentially, and a massive air base that we've essentially handed them. And I want to remind you, Mike, the same people, Blinken, Austin, and others, and Biden, that were in charge of the withdrawal from Iraq that led to the rise of ISIS are the same ones in charge of this disastrous policy, and they need to be held to account.
I just want to let our audience know we were showing video of Afghans weeping for joy, Taliban Afghans weeping for joy, there they are, celebrating their apparent victory over the Afghan forces as they marched right into Kabul and are prepared to declare victory over their own government and basically regain power. So it's just a stunning day to see some of these images right now coming out of Afghanistan after 20 years of the longest war in U.S. history.
Well, and we did have options. We did have the option to leave a small counterterrorism force, one to bolster. I want to be clear, the Afghan army was out doing the fighting and dying, but they were bolstered by our air support, and they were bolstered by the battlefield psychology that America was with you. On the other side of this, you have Pakistan, China, and others that are backing the Taliban, and we have essentially surrendered the battlefield. This problem will follow us home, and it will be far worse. And my heart breaks in particular for the family of Navy veteran Mark Furix. The Taliban have been holding a hostage now, an American hostage, during this entire process. And meanwhile, you have the State Department threatening that you'll not be invited to cocktail parties in Europe and face international isolation. Look, the Taliban understand strength and leverage and bombs on foreheads, Mike. That's what they understand. I can tell you from personal experience. And this just kind of, I don't know another word for it except for fecklessness and weakness that they sense in Washington. And they're going to continue to take advantage, and so will their jihadi allies until they're hitting America again.
Decades after World War II, the United States still has troops stationed in Japan, Italy, Germany. Decades after the Korean conflict, the United States has troops stationed in South Korea. Isn't there a strategic argument to be made for keeping American forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, considering the neighborhoods they are in? I'm not saying nation building, but being eyes and ears on the ground to stay aware of what's going on in very dangerous neighborhoods.
Well, that's right. That's the argument I've been making and others, and I made it across multiple administrations. Biden can pretend to be done with Afghanistan, but Afghanistan's not done with us. And what happens in Afghanistan doesn't stay in Afghanistan. It will spill out into the region, and it will follow us home. So if his criteria is, well, we don't get involved in civil strife, North and South Korea, Colombia, the Philippines, we can go down the list, and this is really about American leadership and standing with our allies, and we could have done so with, I remind people that we went in with less than 100 special forces backed by American air power working with Afghans on the ground. So what's the policy now going forward? Are we going to allow this hotbed of terrorism to fester until it becomes so bad we lose so many soldiers going back again, but this time with no local allies, no bases, and let this cancer spread and become far worse? And I'm hearing crickets from the administration on that point on what next.
There's reporting from Axios today that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, is saying the terror threat level to the U.S. has to go up, basically based on the Taliban reasserting its power in Afghanistan. Was there any talk of that on the conference call today, and your thoughts on the terror threat level here at home?
Nothing, and frustratingly, the conference call was cut short. I don't think they wanted those tough questions. So Leader McCarthy has asked for another call because they need to be asking what happens to the ammunition, artillery, and armor and everything the Taliban now controls. That Biden's intelligence community has been very clear that al-Qaeda intends to hit the West and hit the United States and the homeland again. We have no bases in the region. Our local allies are being massacred. We have no friendly government. Afghanistan's surrounded by Pakistan, Iran, Russia, and others. I mean, this is one of the worst foreign policy disasters in the history of the United States. And we're getting nothing from President Biden and a shoulder shrug from his cabinet.
Congressman Mike Waltz of the great state of Florida, thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
All right. Thank you, Mike.